Hi, I'm Rebecca Lucero, and today our lecture is going to be on critically thinking about our families. So you should have done the readings, look at your fish, and also what is normal. And so we're kind of going to be discussing that in this lecture video, kind of going over what you've read. So first, I'd like for you to think about what is a family. All of us are coming into this course with some kind of view about what a family is, some kind of picture of that. So I kind of want to discuss the assumptions that we might make when we think of the word family, right? A lot of us are going to be thinking about a biological family where a mother and a father have biological children. And so that's probably what comes into most people's minds when we think about family. It's important to realize that there's lots of different types of families, right? There's a biological family. It might be a word that you hear more now is that it's my chosen family or my family by choice. Some families will include people who are adopted. Some may include grandparents or aunts and uncles or cousins that are very close in proximity. Maybe they live together, maybe they interact more closely. Also, sometimes people might like adopt or take somebody into their home, so it might be a friend but functions more as a family member. And then also sometimes, as people grow older, sometimes they'll have groups of friends who function as a family. So rather than going home to mom and dad's for Thanksgiving, they get together with a certain group of friends who really function as their support system. So there are some different definitions of family, and so I just want you to be aware of the assumptions that you make when we talk about the family. So let's talk about what is normal, right? Normal is a word we throw out a lot. What is a normal family? When people think about a normal family, a lot of them think of the nuclear family, right? There's a mom, a dad, two kids, maybe a few more, right? But that's a lot of times when they're thinking about what is a normal family. If you're a family with 16 kids, right, maybe you're not a normal family. Or maybe if your parents are divorced, people might say that's not normal. So a lot of times I feel like when people think of normal, they kind of think of this nuclear family. But there's, a lot of divorce, death, blended families, grandparents that are functioning as parents. There's homosexual parents. And so normal is kind of an ambiguous word. It's a subjective word, right? What does it really mean to be normal? And so one thing that I'd like for you to think about as we go through this course is to think about families not in terms of what's normal and abnormal, but what's functional and what's dysfunctional, what's healthy versus unhealthy. And that's really what we're going to be focusing on in this course. There's lots of different families that look very different, but just because a family looks different doesn't mean that it may not be healthy or functional. So I think really looking at the fact that there's going to be many different dynamics in different families, but looking, are those dynamics functional or healthy? Okay, so you guys did the reading, look at your fish. And a lot of people, when they do this reading, get a little confused, like, what did I just read? So I want you to think about for a second about how this applies to our subject. Why would I give you this reading that seems pretty different? It doesn't talk about families, it doesn't talk about addiction, right? We're just looking at this student who's trying to learn more about insects, but is then asked to look at a fish, right? So I want you to think about what ways are you like this student, right? We are going to be looking at addiction in a new way. The importance of this reading is that you begin to understand that you are like this student. I'm asking you as a student in this course to look deeper into yourself, your family, the way that you see the world, the assumptions that you make, because it's really easy to say, I know the fish. Like, I've looked at it, I've done this much work with it, like, I'm pretty sure I know a lot about this fish. But the more that you can recognize your assumptions, the more that you can realize that there is much more to learn, and the more open you are to seeing things differently, the more that you will be able to learn and gain insight into your own life and also hopefully for your future career or whatever that may be. So I want you to also think about what assumptions you've already made about addiction specifically, and then also assumptions you made about families. Maybe just looking at the slides previously, you realize some assumptions that you made about what is a family and what a family looks like. You also probably have assumptions about what an addict looks like, what the family of an addict looks like, right? And so we're going to dive into these subjects more deeply, and you'll begin to gain some understanding that will help you really be able to challenge those assumptions. And some of your assumptions may be correct, right? But it's going to be important for you to be willing to look at everything to get a more accurate picture of what addiction and recovery looks like in the family. Okay, so here are some questions that I'd like for you to ponder for yourself, for your own family. If you don't feel like you have a family, maybe another family you know, just kind of apply these questions to a family, and it's going to help you to kind of think a little bit more critically about how things are operating in this particular family. So I'd like you to ponder, who makes decisions for the family? What does that decision-making process look like? Who makes time for who, right? Do the parents make time for the children? Do the parents make time for each other but not the children? Do they make, time for one particular child but not the other? Do they make time for grandparents but not, not for the spouse? Yeah, who makes time for who? Is there time together as a family? And what does that look like? Does the family have shared hobbies and chores? Do they share recreational activities as well as responsibilities? And what do those look like? How does the family deal with feelings? Do they discuss them? Do they express them? What does anger look like in this family? In some families, it might look like violence. In some, it might look like complete silence. In some, it might be yelling or, fighting in one way or another, right? What does anger look like in this family? How open and honest is this family? Are there family secrets? Are people in this family reliable? Do they keep commitments? Does the family support each other in individual endeavors? So these are critical thinking questions. When we look at these more specific questions, we're learning a lot more about this family, right? We're examining these different dynamics in the family, beginning to understand on a deeper level how this family operates. So these are the types of questions that we're going to be asking throughout the semester, the types of questions that are going to help us learn more about the family, and particularly about the addict family. What's going on in this type of family? What does the family look like? What do the dynamics, interactions look like? And how does addiction develop maybe from some of these specific interactions? And how do interactions respond to addiction? And so we're going to be looking at both directions of influence. So here we're going to look at the areas of familial interaction: communication, acceptance, reality, individuality, needs, growth. So this is from the reading, What is Normal? And we're just going to explore some questions and some concepts related to the reading into these particular areas. So first I want to talk about communication. Communication is a process, right? Communication isn't always perfect. It's a matter of communicating things and then clarifying what was communicated, what was meant to be communicated, what was understood, what was spoken. And so really a lot of times people may blame one person for communication, but it is a two-way street, and it's really important not only that we try to communicate what we're thinking or feeling, but that we also make sure that other people understand, and that we also make sure that we're understanding what they are communicating. It always requires two people, and problems usually exist in communication, right? That's the most common thing that couples come in for therapy for, right? They sit down in my office and I say, well, what's going on? We have communication problems. So really, communication is a really important part of families, and we're going to be looking at communication in the addict family, communication in recovery, and how these things differ. Communication should be open and honest, but I'm sure, like you all know, there's probably been times that you've lied about things or you withhold information. Being truly open and honest is a very difficult endeavor because it requires you first to be very honest with yourself, and that isn't always easy. A lot of times we want to see ourselves as better than we are. Sometimes it's hard to admit that sometimes we're self-interested, sometimes we don't care, sometimes we do things that we're embarrassed of, sometimes we make mistakes, and so sometimes it's hard to be open and honest because we sometimes don't want to believe that that we're as human as we are. And so that, this is a very difficult process because it requires both a personal growth process in terms of being willing to accept one's own humanity in order to be able to communicate that to someone else. Acceptance is somewhat related to communication. It's also a process. It's being willing to see both the good and the bad in others. A lot of times you've probably seen this with friends or family, right? They start dating someone and they only talk about the good things and they ignore all the bad things, all the red flags. Or you might have friends, right, that don't ever date because nobody's good enough. They only see the bad in somebody. Or you might have, a sibling or maybe even a parent that complains a lot about their spouse and is, nothing can ever be done right. So a lot of times we might not be willing to see both the good and bad in others. It's important for people to be able to do that in order to see their families accurately, right? We need to see both the good parts of our family and the bad parts. It's letting go of wanting something to be the way that we hope it will be, right? It's being willing to adjust our expectations to what is rather than what we want. It's also being willing to see the bigger picture and accepting people for where they are at. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to love those people or be with those people, but it is being willing to understand why they are the way they are and then operating within that reality, which brings us to the next point. So reality. So this is about learning the facts. A lot of times people might ignore certain things about their family because it's embarrassing or they don't like it. And so they create these family myths that maybe we're this really happy family or I'm in a really happy marriage, when in reality they may know that it's kind of a show or a front for other people. It's really important to accept reality and operate in reality. And that can be pretty difficult for people because often people do not want to accept the bad in life. I've worked a lot with children who have been sexually abused, and so often I will see that the family has been fighting for some time the reality that the child was being abused, right? Nobody wants to believe that, a family member or loved one has hurt your child in that way. And often parents are very invested in it not being true because people feel it's the worst thing that can happen to your kid. They don't want to see the signs that this may have happened. So that would be kind of a denial of reality. This bad thing, I don't want it to be true. I don't want the drug problem to be severe. I don't want my child to have been abused. So I operate in this place where I ignore facts or information that's incoming so that I can perpetuate a reality that's comfortable for me. Also, individuality. This is really key for a healthy family, developing a sense of self, right? Each person in the family should have a sense of self. This requires both a development of oneself and recognizing others' individuality. Often we each want some freedom to develop ourselves and do what we want, but sometimes we extend that to other people in the sense that we want them to also be what we want them to be in our lives. So it's being willing to do the work to develop our own sense of self and also giving other people the space to develop their own individuality. And that can be harder than you think. This concept of individuality also requires that we accept ourselves and others. People are going to be different from us, and we accept that. We don't expect them to be what we want or like us, but we accept them for who they are and what they love. And so that is part of that creation of space. So another part of the areas of familial interaction is needs. I want to emphasize that needs are important, right? Each of us has needs. They may be emotional, they may be physical, mental. There's lots of different needs that each of us have, and they are very important. Your needs are important. But it is also important to realize that needs will not always be satisfied. Often our loved ones really want to meet our needs, but that doesn't mean that they're always able to, and that doesn't make the relationship bad. A lot of times as we grow up and we grow in our relationships, we need to realize that it's okay if somebody doesn't meet all our needs. What really matters is that we're communicating our needs and that they respond to our communication about our needs. Also, another thing to know is that needs change over time, and so this requires constant communication. What worked last time might not work this time. We might have wanted somebody to be more involved in a problem and provide more support, and then the next time we might want to solve this problem more independently. So just be aware that needs are important, but they might not always be satisfied and they're always changing. So it's a very important area of interaction because of its importance, but also the fact that it changes a lot. And the last area of interaction has to do with growth. So I'd like for you to kind of ponder individually, have you made a personal commitment to growth? Are you trying to live a life of growth? And why would that be important? And what happens if we're not growing? That's something I kind of want you to ponder on your own, just to think about that. What happens to a family when individuals are committed to personal growth? And what happens when individuals aren't? Or what happens when one individual is and the others aren't? And just kind of ponder that and think about how individual growth will contribute to family interactions. So here's a few more things for you to ponder if you didn't already have enough. I want you to think about, in what ways is your family healthy and in what way is your family unhealthy? What are some common dynamics in your family? How do you contribute to problems in your family? How would your personal growth contribute positively to your family? And what things do you blame yourself for that might actually be a family problem? Maybe there are ways that maybe you or someone else in your family might be getting blamed for something that might be a problem that actually reaches every person in the family and is not just within a particular individual. So I hope this PowerPoint has been helpful in looking more critically at the family and helping you to understand what types of questions will help you to kind of discover more about the family and challenge some of the assumptions so that you are more open to learning new things about addiction and the family.